I am speaking with John Sarrouf. John is the Executive Director of Essential Partners. Their work is to build thriving communities, strengthened by differences and connected by trust. I want to talk to John about the feelings that many of us are having that we are unsafe. For our Black and Brown friends, for immigrant communities, this is a very different question. They face dangers that are institutional every day, systemic affronts that white communities simply do not. But I know white people from this area who in 2018 felt unsafe because of the migrant caravan. Many of us feel unsafe because of climate change and, of course, COVID. I personally feel unsafe when I see images on TV of unmarked militias with bulletproof vests and automatic rifles. Just yesterday, we learned of a domestic terrorist group's attempt to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan. This makes me feel very unsafe. It seems as if this feeling of being unsafe has increased exponentially. And yet I drive to Market Basket and go out and get a cup of coffee like I always have. And this feels bigger than just turning off the news. So John, can you help us understand this feeling that I think so many of us are feeling right now?
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for the acknowledgement that we are differently safe in our country. You know, that there are some people who are living in a different set of circumstances structurally, economically, that make their lives less safe. The statistics would show that our lives are as safe now as they have ever been in the history of our species. You know, that our life expectancies are long, that our crime rates in our own country is down, and with some exception for perhaps an uptick recently in certain rates in certain places. But so yeah, if we are safer in all of these ways, then why is it that we feel so unsafe? I actually think that your suggestion to turn the news off sometimes is a good one, because I do think that that contributes to the constant feeding us of images. And I think images are so powerful. And sometimes it's just on in the background all the time, images and in a loop over and over again of things that are going wrong. So my sense of what might be going wrong in my own community is expanded to every single thing that has gone wrong in the last few days all over the country. And I think that leads to a lot of anxiety.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think there are two other factors that I think are important in our sense of safety. One is our larger sense of alienation from each other. A recent Pew Research poll said that 70% of Americans feel like our country is, Americans are less, we have less trust in our fellow Americans than we did 20 years ago. And there's lots of factors for that. A lot of that is a sense of alienation. We're just not as connected in a lot of ways. We have a political discourse that has created such large divides that we don't see ourselves as belonging to each other in our country. And so we think of some people who are in a militia in some other part of the country as a direct threat to us. We don't understand their culture. They don't understand ours. They feel threatened by us, which is why they've joined a militia to begin with. And so there's a lot of reasons that we have a large amount of distrust of each other, the political discourse being one of them. Another is a breakdown in some of our institutions, some of the institutions that used to connect us and keep us in community, even across our differences, where we both believed in, reaching across those differences and working together. We also had trust in leadership that would help us stay connected.
So do you want to say a little bit more about what would an institution be that could help us out right now? And then we'll go on to leadership.
Right. So, I work with institutions around the country and in particular interfaith groups. So I think interfaith groups are a key faith groups in general, but the working of interfaith groups is one of the key leverage points that we have in our country to help us reunite and see each other as neighbors, friends, people that we can rely on, trust, and feel that we belong to.
Mhm.
And I think that would increase our level of a sense of safety. So there's this group in Columbia, Maryland, and this was a project that was inspired by a great leader, Elijah Cummings, passed away, the late congressman from the Baltimore area, who was one of
My
those
district.
leaders, your district, one of those leaders who took to the streets when people were feeling alienated, angry, desperate, and were rioting in Baltimore, took to the streets and said, "We can do better than this. We can find another way to work together." And was one of those inspirational leaders that people listened to and said, "Okay, we'll follow you." So he um, in 2017 asked a group of interfaith leaders in the Columbia, Maryland, in Howard County, to start a dialogue between their congregations. And this was Jewish community and Muslim community, the Baha'i community, Catholics, Protestants, Black Baptists, and we went and worked with them, trained them to dialogue. Hundreds and hundreds of people came out to dialogue with each other across different faiths about race, about religion, about the economy, and have now been 3 years doing that. And their sense of knowing each other, knowing their neighbor. And I'll just tell you one thing that came out of that. The rabbi at the synagogue down there, who just received an award for this work, for in a national level, said that after the shooting in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, right? And there you go again. Here's another moment where it just feels like, is anybody safe anywhere? You're in your own place of worship, and somebody comes in and shoots it up. After that, and because of the work that they had done in an interfaith way, they did a vigil in their synagogue. She had to do the service twice. There were so many people that came out from all over the county to support the Jewish community in Howard County that she had to do a service inside for all the people that they could fit inside the synagogue, and then had to go out and do another one in the parking lot for all the people who couldn't even fit in the place. Now, that is the kind of effort that creates bonds and a sense of community that I think decreases our sense that we're not in a safe place. When you see people coming out in support of you and your community, you inherently feel more safe. And so I think that's the kind of institutional work, interfaith work. I think there's a role to play for our leaders, our local mayor, our city councilors, people who come out and try to bring people together across our differences rather than drive a wedge in those differences to make the most of it for political gain.
Mm. And I will say, I saw that firsthand when Gloucester's chief of police, Conley, came out to that Black Lives Matter protest on the Rotary. I
Absolutely.
felt entirely differently about our community.
Absolutely. And when the police were directing traffic on making it safe for people to cross the street, you get a sense that I live in a community where I can protest, I can have my voice heard, and the people that might feel threatened, by police, because there is this false sense in this movement around racial justice that it's against police officers and against law enforcement in general, as opposed to this being a larger call for racial justice. Those police officers were there to protect us, even in the moment when they might have felt threatened. That kind of leadership, that kind of community that I think we do feel here in Gloucester in a special way, means a lot to leading to people feeling like they are safe in our community.
Absolutely. And that was firsthand. I witnessed that firsthand. So in another conversation, you and I talked about structures
Yeah.
and how we've lost a lot of our structures. Do you want to tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I think that some of the customs that people have to bring each other together have gone away, and I think that some of the institutions that we have often, I mean, and there was a whole book written about this, Bowling Alone. How some of the customs and the patterns of our lives that bridge our differences, and I think about them, especially in this moment when we can't get together.
Right.
It really exacerbates that. I did some research in Lebanon after the Civil War. My family is Lebanese by origin. And one of the things that the people there talked about over and over again in terms of their sense of being in community, and this was my family in particular where I was doing the research, sort of equally divided community between Christians and Druze. And they went through a 15-year civil war, not unlike what's going on in Syria right now, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I talked to them about what held them together for as long as it did, and what helps them reconcile after the war, they talked about weddings and funerals. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, everybody invites everybody to weddings and to funerals, and you go, no matter who it is. You're invited, and you go. And these are these customs, these cultural structures that we have that allow us to stay connected, even when there's distrust, even when we've been through civil war. These things helped to bind us. If we were there at the beginning of a relationship, at the birth of a child, at the death of a loved one, those are things that help us say, yes, we belong to this community together, and we're going to stay belonging. I think that it's in a lot of ways, people have created their own. People, in the lack of feeling of some of the traditions and some of the cultural norms that we've had, they create their own, which is exciting. I think all the people that come out to the school play and work on a set together for their elementary school play. It doesn't matter whether you voted for one candidate or another, or what religion you are, or how long you've been in town. People, building sets together and working towards a common goal like that. Structural norms like that help to bind a community and are really, really important for us to hold on to. So, in as some of the more traditional ones have faded away, it's really important for us to continue to invest in new ones and find ways to continue to connect with each other.
Well, I just think it's so striking that you said weddings and funerals, because that is exactly what we cannot have right now.
Right? Absolutely.
It is like definitively. So, there is that much more of this unsafe and anxious feeling because of COVID is just, if we could come together for one of those celebrations, for so many reasons, it could improve our well-being.
I think you're absolutely right. We are extra isolated right now. We don't have as many ways to meet each other in these places of celebration, places of custom. We're not doing the school play
We're
this
meeting on the
year.
soccer field, watching
Or
our
meeting on the
soccer.
soccer field.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
That's exactly right. And those are the
Yeah.
places that help bind a community, and that's hard to do. So then we're at home more, watching more news,
There you go.
which is right. It gets us back into that cycle.
Yeah. Well, any suggestions? I'm definitely going to turn off social media and television a little bit more, but any other suggestions? We
Right.
can
Well,
just find other ways of making these groups happen, but
right. Yeah. I mean, I do think that there are ways in which this medium in Zoom is helping. I also think that it's nice to make sure that you know your neighborhood, and and I think that's something that we do well here in on Cape Ann, as we have those we have some custom around being outside with each other. We're lucky in that way. Um, I also think that it's important not to get into your own silo and only with people that you agree with or identify with you politically, and to only think of as of somebody who voted for that person as an enemy, which is what the polls are saying or what the research says, that we've turned each other into an adversary rather than a neighbor. And so I think we need to reinvest in our identity as neighbors, as a part of an American experience, and continue to connect, tell our stories to each other. It's too important to have a sense that I belong. And you and I belong to each other. We're inextricably linked to each other. We have to be if we're going to tackle the challenges that we have in our own neighborhood and certainly as a nation.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. I feel less unsafe already.
That's great. Me too. Thank you.